Hey, good morning, Dr. Fred, TMT, Tuesday Morning Transformation. I have a question for you. How do you spend your life and your time? There was an author, Jack Kornfield. He wrote a book, Buddha's Life Instruction Book, and he paraphrased a quote, and a question was asked to Buddha, and they said, what's the biggest mistake we can make in our life? And Buddha replied with, you think you have time. And so when we look at time, what's the definition of time? So when I looked it up, in clock time we have past, present, future, but really time is a continual succession of now moments. It's continuous, it's eternal. And the definition is it's an indefinite, continuous progress of existence. It's an indefinite, what's that mean? It's eternal, but it's a continuous progress of existence. When something exists, it exists in that moment. When you identify the existence of something, you're in the moment. So it's a progression of existence. That thing exists from one now moment to the other. And so the next thing is, because it's continuous, you can only capture time for a moment, and then that moment's gone. So it's kind of like taking a handful of sand. We grasp a handful of sand, but it slips through our fingers, right? That's a metaphor for time. Time passes, and people want certainty and safety, and they want to hang on to conditions, and and things always change, and there's certain things that we don't want to change. Imagine the harder you grasp sand, the more it slips through your fingers. And that's what we want to do with our humanity. We want to grasp it, but we can't stop time. We can't stop progression, and change is the constant. It's our resistance that causes us ton of stress. So time is unlimited and free, right? Yet it's the limit of our lifetime that makes it priceless. Did you catch that? Time is unlimited and free, but the limit in this physical body is what makes time priceless. So once time has passed, then it's our past. We can't ever get it back. So as time passes, we always have a past. Each second, the beginning of this video, it's already passed. It's gone for life. Now we have the remembrance. So what time really is an association of emotion. Now the average person lives to about 78 years old. It's funny because the older I get, the more I think 78 sounds really young, right? It seems like, oh my God, that could be just around the corner. I'm 57 right now. So I don't want to be average. Let's be an exception to what's average, or let's live exceptionally. Steve Jobs had a quote, and he said, well, first of all, since our time in this physical body is limited, how we choose to spend that time is what's really key in the meaning of life. Steve Jobs said, time is limited, so don't spend it living someone else's life. Don't live the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. There's a world changer. Time is really an emotion. So how time passes is really the meaning that you assign it, and can determine the quality of your life. So we know, we can, when you're looking into your loved one's eyes, when you're looking at your baby, when you're watching a sunset, when you're in that state of joy and love, when you smell a flower and you breathe that in and you take that in a moment, time right there could be endless. A second could seem like forever. When you're in a hurry, or remember when you were dating your spouse, or you're in a really compelling conversation. Man, you look up at the phone like, oh my God, we've been on the phone 45 minutes. It seems like 10 minutes. When you're immersed in something totally captivating, time flies. We just gave a boot camp self-empowerment seminar. Man, I spoke for 6 hours straight, no breaks, yet hardly anybody went to the bathroom. All eyes, even in the back room, are captivated on me. I look at my watch, shoot, that was 2 hours, man, I need to get on the program. You go to a Tony Robbins seminar, 16 hours, you don't even leave the room, yet the day flies by. Or you can go to a seminar, or you can go to a sermon in church, or not that it's church, but it depends on the speaker. You get a boring, monotone speaker. Oh my God, when is this guy going to be done? Right? So time and the valuation of time is the meaning and the emotion that we assign it. So how do we look at value for time? Well, let's look at this. Well, I had this experience I want to tell you about. This may trip some people out, but when I was 35, I was going through a divorce, and me and my wife, we had an impending divorce. It was right around the corner, and we're sitting in church, and I was in so much pain. You know how when you're in fever, your whole body aches? Man, I had the worst 10 out of 10 full body aching, and the pastor up front, it was a really charismatic church, said, pray on your own. And with my deepest heartfelt intention, I was like, God, relieve me from this pain. And all of a sudden, I was out of my body. And I was in this space of infinite white light. There was no depth to the light. And all of a sudden, there was this massive, bright light that was brighter than the sun. And I saw the silhouette of Jesus. And the amount of light that came from him was so bright, but it didn't burn your eyes. And in that light was the greatest love that was not of this earth. It wasn't human, it was truly divine love. And I felt this power and authority, and I immediately fell down to my knees, because at that point in my life I felt like I wasn't worthy, right? Now I would probably run up and embrace him. But I fell to my knees in the most powerful love and authority, and I reached out my right hand, and I felt the cloth at the bottom of his robe on this finger. And as soon as I touched it, a lightning bolt shot from this fingertip into my body. Boom! It was like a lightning bolt without the shock, and I snapped opened my eyes, and I went, holy crap. And I was looking around like, did anybody see that I was gone? And everybody's praying. Then I realized how much time had passed. It might not have even been a millisecond. And then I got the perception that time is not a unit. It's not a second, it's not a month, it's not a year, it's not a week. Time is an experience. Time is a beingness. And when I finally came back, like, okay, I'm in church, nobody noticed I was just gone, that my body was healed. I was full of joy, all that pain was gone. So I was truly healed. And then I realized healing is a second. Disease can be a second. Depression can be a second. Or the greatest joy can be a second. We're a spiritual being having a human experience, and the human experience can range from the worst shame into the greatest joy, and we can experience all of it with love and appreciation. And then we know in our depression, we know that it's just an emotion. What do we focus on? We can change our focus and experience the greatest joy. But how do we sign an emotion? Well, let's look at different examples of value of life. Well, let's look at a year. How do we know the value of a year? Well, ask a person that's been battling cancer for a year. Ask their spouse or their kids when their dad is fighting cancer. How about a month? Ask a parent whose child passes after a month when they were born with a congenital birth defect, and then their kid passes and they had 1 month to know their child. What's a week? Ask a person sleeping on a sidewalk for the next iPhone, because it's probably just around the corner. That's a week on hard cement, right, with anticipation. What's a day? Ask a person who lives in the path of a Class 5 hurricane when you know tomorrow's the day when your whole life can change. What's an hour? Ask the spouse of a military person that's waiting for that plane to land after they haven't seen him for a year. Imagine that anticipation. What's a minute? Ask a person for that life-changing phone call, or 1 minute before you're about to give your vows to spend the rest of your life with the person standing in front of you. What's a second? Ask a person who just watched their loved one take their last breath. What's a millisecond? Ask a person who just took second in the Olympics. So we see the value of time, and the value of time is our interpretation and our perception. So Jay Shetty had a great quote. He was a monk turned entrepreneur. He says, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is time flies. The good news is we are the pilot. So how are we going to spend our time? So this was another idea from him. Each day has 86,400 seconds. Well, that's truly a fact. The reality is each day you're deposited 86,400 seconds into your life account. So see, we have time, but what value does that have to us? Imagine if every day Since, let's look at money. If every day you had $86,400 deposited in your account, but at the end of that day, that $86,400 were gone, just like time. At the end of the day, 86,400 seconds are gone. They've passed, and now it becomes our past. How would you spend that money? Well, let's look at the movie Groundhog Day, right? With Bill Murray. That's a comedy, but he wakes up same time every day. The same thing happens. And then he realizes, you know what? It's pointless. What's the deal? I'm going to be gluttonous. So he eats and he does stuff and he doesn't care about people. And then you realize focusing on yourself is a miserable life. How does he break out of it? Well, then eventually, since I'm going to do this and focus on myself is freaking miserable and unfulfilling, then he starts contributing to others. He starts helping people. He learns to play the piano. He learns arts. He learns ice carving. He studies things. And then by the end of the movie, how does he break out of that repeating cycle? How many times? How useful? What's the emotion and what's the value of the time that we're using those 86,400 seconds every day? He finally breaks out of it through thinking about others and through contribution. And through that, he breaks out of his own prison. Isn't that what Groundhog Day is really about? I mean, it's funny and we think it's a comedy, but when you really look at the principle and the premise of that movie, isn't that really our lives? Because when we are into depression or sadness, why? Because typically we're focusing on ourselves. Yes, things happen in our life. What's the meaning we assign? Can we look at it with a higher consciousness? Can we appreciate our humanity and find joy? So every day, 86,400 seconds are deposited in your life account. We get to choose how we spend it, because once it passes, it becomes our past. So there's just a thought that I'd like to leave you, and that is life and time are our two greatest teachers, or can be. Time teaches us lessons and the value of life. Let me repeat that. Time teaches us lessons and the value of life. Life teaches us to value time. So time teaches us lessons and the value of life, and life teaches us to value time. So let's value time. Let's fulfill our soul purpose. Let's make time one of our greatest commodities, so that time can really teach us the value of life. Thanks, you guys. I love you. Please comment. Please share. Everybody around the world needs this message. Again, this is what I go through in life, so hopefully this brings you a blessing as well. Thank you. Love you guys. See you next week.